And I'm Roxanne, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you to today's webinar, Movement to Thrive Together. And I'm just one of a whole host of people who have brought this webinar together. And so on behalf of our co-conveners, Community Initiatives, and the Rippel Foundation, I just want to welcome you to the webinar. So the goals for today, just as very quickly, our focus today is highlighting the signals of the growing movement in our Thriving Together movement and trying to make visible any momentum that's happening among states, regions, and local communities. We also want this as an opportunity to continue to build relationships and exchange practices, tools, innovations, anything that you can think of that does support showing movement with Thriving Together. And then also to hear from you. So what do you see in your sphere, your community, your network that shows that the Thriving Together movement has momentum? So to get us going today, I'm going to do a really quick overview of the thriving ethos, the emerging movement infrastructure, and then calling out a few highlights of movement momentum. Since I'll be covering things very, very quickly, my colleagues will be dropping in links to the resources, sites, so that you can dig in, get more information, and really just learn a lot more. And since I'm just going to be spot hitting some things. Likewise, if you know or if you're part of an effort or an action that you know about, we want to encourage you to drop a note in the chat and then we can follow up with that. All right, let's go to the thriving ethos. The next slide, Molly, thanks. Here we have a quick recap of what is emerging as the thriving ethos. Our North Star, as always, is all people and places thriving together, no exceptions. But to get there, we're committed to anchoring in the value of intergenerational well-being and equity. The belief that we and our children deserve a future that underscores just legacies for living together and invest in the strategies that brings that to life. The path forward to accomplish this is really deepening the practices of shared stewardship. And this is marked by a number of commitments. Reinforce a unifying and hopeful narrative, that we honor our differences actively work to bridge those differences. There's a whole host of them that are listed on the slide that's kind of small, but also investing in the vital conditions and recognizing that there's power behind the vital conditions as multi-solvers. I think there might be a few more people that are still unmuted. And then the last one, but by no means the only one, is the commitment to measuring progress of the movement. So there are links on here, and again, more links are going to be dropped in just in case you're relatively new to this that you can go to. Let's go to the next slide, Molly, the vital conditions framework. So this might be a very familiar slide to you all, but we want to have it up here to just remind everyone about the 7 vital conditions, whether it's the thriving natural world, basic needs, health and safety, humane housing, meaningful work and wealth, lifelong learning, reliable transportation, and belonging and civic muscle. And again, another reminder that belonging and civic muscle is in the center because it's both a vital condition and a practical capacity that's necessary for equitable success in every other kind of work that we do. All right. So the emerging movement infrastructure. So to grow a movement, we need to create the conditions for that movement to gain traction. This slide is just illustrating what's needed, the infrastructure that's taking shape. So just to quickly hit them, the role models, these are examples and stories of what's working, and even challenges of what people are facing. Whether this is in person or virtual, we want to share and surface exemplars of stories of progress. That's part of what we're doing today. Peer action and learning. So the networks and groups working nationally, regionally, and locally. We know that we need to build shared stewardship skills. And this is including supportive policies and resources to help build them. We have well-being measurement on the top right, which could be surveys, dialogues. We're actually going to highlight at least one today. And then also goals and learnings take the form of national benchmarks, data platforms, and actionable data. There's tools, curricula, and topic resources. These need to be accessible and resources that help individuals and organizations and networks. And then, of course, funding flows. So whether it's at the federal, the regional, the local level, all of these to influence and affect how resources are allocated. So this is what we mean by the movement infrastructure. Again, all of these categories can be delved into, and I think there's a link for that as well. So let's get to the movement highlights so that we can get to our featured speakers and dive right into our feature. So right here, we just took a handful, not a lot. There's so much happening that we had to pick and choose. But for one in particular, there's the Fox Data Exchange. This is a work that's being done in Northwest Wisconsin. It's a one-stop shop for data for the Tri-County area, and it's really featuring the 7 vital conditions framework on their site with the vision that all community members have access to information and insights that enable collaborative decision-making and action taking to enhance overall well-being for their communities. To other assets that we have highlighted on here. So the Healthy Democracy Ecosystem Map, they just launched, and in fact, I think their webinar is still going on. But they just launched, and this is a resources that's identifying and connecting organizations, funders, networks, and practitioners across the nation to sustain and strengthen democratic practices. And this is a key tool for strengthening the vital condition of civic muscle. We also had the Belonging Barometer, and this is work that's being done since 2023 by Over Zero and American Immigration Council. They were working on the first national survey of belonging in the United States, and out of this work came the Belonging Barometer. And this is a new measure demonstrating the connection between belonging and critical life outcomes. And again, this supports being able to measure, of course, belonging. And then almost done, furthering belonging in civic muscle is connective tissue. This is a collection of projects that offers as a starting point for renewing commitment to community. This includes a framework providing policymakers with an actionable set of policy opportunities, a newsletter resurfacing organizations and initiatives that inspire and deepen action to civic life, and also an online community that should be coming soon, supporting and connecting community building practitioners, policymakers, and neighbors. And then, of course, Building the Will to Thrive, a new playbook for the equitable well-being. And these are from our colleagues from the Rippel Foundation and Case Made. It's a playbook for establishing the vital conditions everyone needs for well-being. It outlines what stewardship and strategic case making are and why they're so important in a time like this, and how our work is there that can happen in every community, and it's essential to reach our goal of all people and places thriving, no exception. Next slide, Molly. This is a quick map of stewards rising, and this is illustrating the organizations and networks all across the nation. It's a growing group of organizations that explicitly focus on establishing the vital conditions. This is only a partial group for illustration, but it's growing, and there's a link in there if you want to give some information on a group that you might know about. But one thing in particular, as you can see over on the left-hand side, is Inland Empire. And that is who our featured group is today. We're going to do a deeper dive in this and hear from leaders at the Inland Empire Vital Conditions Network. And this is the fastest growing, most diverse communities in the US. And they're using vital conditions to shape a new narrative about collective well-being. And with that, I'm going to turn it on over to Monty.
Great. Well, greetings, everyone, and nice to join you. Thank you, Roxanne, for kicking us off and reminding us of really the incredible momentum in a lot of different ways and a lot of different places here. I'm with the Community Initiatives Network, one of the groups that's part of this growing movement for thriving together. And so glad that you all could carve out time to be with us. And especially excited, to actually lift up, as Roxanne points out, one of the most fastest growing, most diverse, extraordinarily rich in all types of cultural resources you're going to hear in the country, and how they're using thriving together as a way to move forward. And I think there's actually a little bit of a video clip, Molly, if I'm that maybe would get us a little bit of a sensory experience before we start to hear from our friends from the IE.
Our ability to have community, to be real, to share what's working, what's not working, to deepen our trust is really crucial for moving any of the issues forward as a region, as the Inland Empire.
These 2 days were impactful with information, impactful with action items, impactful with collaboration and stewardship. I'm never disappointed when I come to the policy conference put on by IECF. So thank you, thank you. I am ready to get to work. So are our partners. Let's go, let's do it.
This is the most exciting thing happening in the region. Communities coming out from every corner. They're bringing their contributions, their gifts of head, heart, hands, and this is what it looks like when it's working.
IEHP Foundation was proud to sponsor this conference, this summit, along with IEHP, because we believe that policy is at the heart of everything that we do, and we cannot advance vibrant health in the region without our community-based partners, without our community foundations, and without that civic muscle and belonging.
These last 2 days of the summit have been a realization of a dream for so many of us here in the Inland Empire, to get all the stakeholders together as a community to help us all realize the American dream.
I love the connections, the collaborations, and I really was excited that people were talking about action plan. So it was really nice to see that it was a start to conversations. There were some really deep topics, but that people are already looking forward to connecting, collaborating, and doing more and taking action towards this.
It brings oxygen to all of us to do the work in our region, in our respective areas. It was great to be in the same room with a lot of leadership, but also folks that are the boots on the ground and doing all of the hard work every day. Getting to meet everyone was really, really beneficial.
When we work together, we succeed, and together we will thrive in the Inland Empire.
Great. So that gives you a very small flavor of this, and want to kind of hear the backstory with three leaders I've had the good fortune to get to know and consider friends at this point, to kind of share a little bit of the story of the Inland Empire, the IE Vital Conditions Network, as we're saying. And so I think we're just going to have an opportunity. I don't know if there is a slide, maybe we can see names and faces as we pivot over to slides. And I think we're lucky to have Susie Gomez with us. Thank you for that. And Alejandra Gutierrez Chavez and Dr. Paulette Brown Hines, all from the Inland Empire. And then Sterling Spearin, who's also spent a little time there, is going to, have a chance to reflect a little bit on kind of what he sees and connect some dots. But to maybe kick us off, Susie, would you mind taking it from here?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you so much. It's such an honor and privilege to be here today. And I actually had not seen that video. So I'm like, this is an extraordinary moment for us. When you think less than a year ago, we were meeting in Atlanta with all of you, Monty, and the folks, the folks here on this call, and thinking about this as a possibility for the IE. And think a year later, look at where we are. We're sitting here, a conversation with all of you, and what can happen, and hearing the voices and seeing my friends and colleagues in that video, and seeing some of you on this call, because I was looking through everyone logging in. So I know you're here too in spirit with us. It is an honor to talk a little bit about the IE. I was born here. I'm first generation. My parents are from Mexico. I grew up in the IE and went to school here, went to junior college and college, my undergraduate and graduate degree. So I raised a daughter, single mom, and still live in the IE. It is an extraordinary place. Everyone will say that. But for those of you who have never visited us and want to have an idea around what the IE is, geographically, it is the largest counties and region in the state and in the nation. We have a little over 6.2 million people that live in just the IE. So I know we were talking a little bit before we jumped on the call, but to kind of put it into context, we are double the size of the population of Arizona, just the IE. And we are larger than 10 states in the United States in terms of just geography. But we've also been challenged with being maybe sometimes some of us call or been considered the stepchild of California, kind of this area that nobody kind of knows much about. But I think to the point of you hearing the voices before I jumped on, we really are a region that's have had to been the change makers, the advocates, the ones that are the lifeline for those community members that really we all call our home here in the IE. But I think what makes us distinct are our resilience, our ability to be really hardworking and changing the conditions we have been able to live and survive in. And the distinction as well around the collaboration, and we'll talk more later as we move through the day, and I get to introduce you to some of my friends and colleagues as well. But overall, the defining characteristic of the IE are the people. We are diverse, and this cultural tapestry of wealth and richness to us. And we've had to be, scrappy in order to survive. And you can, next slide, please. I think because of the geographic distinctions of desert and mountains and lakes and urban and rural communities, those challenges also have kept a lot of the reason why there hasn't been a lot of continuity around how we strategize as a region. I think everyone and the experience of me, I'm now 20, 30 years into helping and working in this community. That has probably been the single most barrier in terms of how do we unify all of our voices. And then here came Vital Conditions, right? It was the hopefulness around the ability that maybe that might work amongst this very diverse region and richness of community. And I think that the building of, I heard, we all hear the reclaiming of our narrative. There's been a small group of coalitions that kind of have responded to this idea that we've had to be able to collaborate in the spaces of housing, in the spaces of immigrant justice, in the spaces like mine around children, and environmental justice out in Coachella and Silicon Valley, our North Shore. That we've had to address those needs and concerns ourselves because we're not waiting for the state or the county or the cities to help us. We've had to be able to find solutions. Next slide, please. So here's what happened with our little group that's now turned into a big group, a handful of us that first started talking about this a year ago with Monty, and of course the powerful, masterful Michelle Decker from the Community Foundation. It is really her leadership, the thought leader around this work, but we could never have done it without the Rippel Foundation, with Monty and his team, with all the partners throughout the region. But most notably, I will say, it was the visit we had in Atlanta a year ago, in which we were just learning about all of you here in the room, and we were wondering how we were going to make this work out in the IE. It seemed almost impossible. And then we met you all. And it was a transformative moment for us, because if it worked in Arizona, if it worked in Northstown, if it worked in the spaces that we were all meeting you, it was different than seeing it on a chart, on this colorful chart about the vital conditions. And then we met you guys and we said, we can do this. And we came back kind of drinking the Kool-Aid around vital conditions, but this idea that this might work and this might be the unifying voice that we've always been hopeful for. And so we did get buy-in from some of the larger partners, and you'll see them here on the screen. but most importantly, we knew we needed to build the infrastructure that was talked about earlier in the presentation this morning around what that would look like. So we do have great partners with Loma Linda and health providers and other foundations, but most notably, as you saw in the video, it is small nonprofits, it is large nonprofits, it is really a diverse group of stakeholders throughout both counties that really see a hopefulness and a way to reach our goals. So next slide, please. So in kind of where we're at now, we came back with the guidance of Monty and his team and everyone else, but also the willingness of those that wanted to see this be successful. And we had to create that structure that lives in the back end and the ability for us to make sure we're including everybody in the work as we move forward, and how we can ensure that parents and children and the voices that have been not involved in the privilege of being in some of the spaces that we were when we learned about vital conditions, that they now have an opportunity to be part of co-designing all of this work. So this idea of fostering advocacy and innovation, I know you'll get to meet my partners today, and we'll talk a little more about that. But definitely at the forefront is the idea that civic muscle and belonging are the driving force in all the work that we do. It also is an ability for us to be like a multi-solver. So it's been able to be a bridging kind of framework around different entities throughout the region, from small to large, to find a space that feels like they belong themselves within this work. And I think that is a really key distinction that we had not seen in this region before. And the building of capacity, since I am a capacity builder by the 10 years that we've been doing it here in the region, we recognize that part of our responsibility is ensuring that we build the capacity of smaller nonprofits and organizations and community members that have not had access to understanding how they can be part of this work. And at the end, the vision for this thriving community, this has been allowing, I think, for us, for the first time, that we can dream together, that it isn't a dream just for children or a dream just for organizations working in housing, but now it is a dream that we can have around what the IE can possibly be, and find solutions to the problems that we've been facing, but in a way in which allows us the dignity about ensuring that all the community that we are representing are at the heart of the decisions that we make. So it is my distinct privilege to now introduce for Paulette Hines, a part of my tag team here from the IE, who's going to talk a little bit about the work that she's doing here in the IE.
Thank you, Susie.
Um,
And it's great to just be in community with all of you. And I'm excited to share a little about our Journalism Innovation Hub and Fund that is housed at and incubated at the Inland Empire Community Foundation. But we're definitely a part of this Vital Conditions Network here in the region. A little background on myself before I start. I am born and raised in the Inland Empire, went to school, public schools, and then got all of my degrees here, my undergrad degree from Cal State San Bernardino, and then I crossed the county line and got my earned my master's and PhD at the University of California, Riverside. I am publisher of the Black Voice News, which has been in publishing for over 52 years here in the Inland Empire. It's second generation publisher of that. And I am a past chair of the board of the Community Foundation, the Inland Empire Community Foundation, which is also, as Susie mentioned, really helping to drive a lot of this work here in the region. So I'll talk a little bit about the hub, what we're doing, and why we're excited about the Vital Conditions Framework. I launched the hub. We actually launched earlier this year, but we started talking about it and thinking about it about 2 years ago when the Community Foundation launched 8 signature funds as a part of our 80th anniversary. And because of my background in journalism and media, became the leader of this hub and fund. So I'd love to talk about how we're using vital conditions, how we're thinking about it, and how we're hoping to tell the story of thriving in our region. So first I want to say we see local journalism as a community service. It's a public good. When it works optimally, it provides accurate information, relevant information, helps people make informed decisions, and it fosters a sense of belonging back to that, a civic muscle and belonging piece with vital conditions, and it moves people to act. So we believe that thriving communities are informed communities, which is one of the reasons we started the fund. Next slide. So we focus on supporting the entire ecosystem in the region. We center equity. We are working to strengthen regional networks. As Susie mentioned, this is a vast region, 2 counties. I was just in Coachella Valley, which is Riverside County, which is on the desert, earlier this week with the hub, and talking to journalists and news organizations there. And they, feel isolated from this part of the region. We have the high desert. So part of the work that we're trying to do with the hub is kind of strengthen the regional networks of media and journalism, local journalism. And we're really working to build collaboration. And I think you're going to hear that again and again in our conversations. So we're just starting this work, as I mentioned. We kicked off in June. We want to partner with our diverse communities in culturally congruent ways. We want to be responsive. We're relying on strong listening and building relationships with community to identify community needs. And so we're starting this as in a way of coordinating across newsrooms. And once again, as Susie mentioned, helping grow capacity to serve community. I think you're going to hear these themes again and again. Next slide. We are in our building phase. We've done some mapping of assets and infrastructure. We really wanted to see there was already an information ecosystem assessment that we were building from that the Listening Post Collective had released in about 2020, 2021. But we started looking at what the infrastructure looked like. So that was one of our first projects. And then we started hosting town halls. These are some of the images from those town halls. One was held at the Policy and Philanthropy Summit that focused on vital conditions. And we were talking about public policy and journalism and what was happening across the state. We're having media workshops. We're having a really cool one on Friday at Esri, where we have someone coming from Big Local News at Stanford to talk about some technologies that we can all utilize as a part of the hub. And then we're having mobile newsrooms, kind of like pop-up newsrooms. So we did that recently at the Cielo Fund Cielo Fund event in Coachella Valley, where we're talking to community and we're creating what we call these visual op-eds, and we're posting those on our Instagram. But we're really doing this to identify, convene, and strengthen these partnerships. Next slide. As Susie mentioned, we're focused on solutions journalism, solutions reporting. And so we're encouraging that through our cooperative newsroom strategy. So we're bringing together independent media makers, independent community newsrooms in the region, and then we're working in partnership to identify issues that are important to them, but to the communities that they serve more importantly. And that's where we have our kind of town halls where we're able to talk directly to community. But it's important for the journalism that we need to produce, especially with that focus on solutions. And that's where the vital conditions framework kind of gives us direction. And you could turn to the next slide. And of course, you've seen this, but we use it even in our conversations and in our presentations. Actually, I presented to a group, SoCal grant makers, and we're like, this is how we're approaching the work. So we're using this kind of solutions framing, and the vital conditions is giving us direction, and we're building beats around these conditions. And we're incentivizing collaboration through the re-granting that we are doing through the fund part of our hub and fund. Our plan is to really enhance local reporting, on these issues, doing accountability reporting, investigative reporting, community reporting. And our first grants are, we have that language actually in the first grants. We just released the grant announcement for a select group of news organizations that we're partnering with. And we've built that, the grant application similar to the work that the SURF, which is now California Jobs First group, is focused on. I think it's a meaningful work and wealth and belonging and civic muscle. So we took their same grant application and created one for our media partners. So we have questions that we're exploring. How do we tell the story of thriving? You know, what does that look like? How do we use data to tell that story as well? What does shared stewardship look like for our region of storytellers and truth tellers as media organizations and journalists? And how do we develop a shared understanding of collective well-being as we talk about solutions framing? So this is all a work in progress. We are just starting, but we're excited about it, and it's really helping to unify the work. So I am looking forward to more discussion with my colleagues here. I want to turn it over to Alejandro for his part of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paula. And hey, good afternoon, everybody. And sometimes I have to pinch myself because I get the pleasure and honor to be surrounded around so many community champions and have a space to build and collaborate with you all for our community. A little bit about myself, as previously mentioned, my name is Alejandro Gutierrez Chavez. I'm a first-generation Chicano from the IE, specifically San Bernardino County, from an urban and rural area here called South Fontana, Bloomington area. And I've worn many different hats in the community. And all of them have been around public service and my whole career. As I believe most of my qualities, my faculties, and a lot of, honestly, my life, I owe it to the community that supported me during when I was extremely young and it got me through the K through 12 system here locally. And so I'm a former educator, but won't say former because I once an educator, always an educator. I taught sixth grade. I coached football and soccer. I worked and pivoted into the county, the public sector, worked in the funder area, supporting children and families, and then pivoted from there to start my own nonprofit community-based organization in the community in the city that raised me in San Bernardino. And we did there, at Lifting Our Stories, we empower community and youth through outdoor leadership, outdoor recreation activities in our natural lands of their beautiful area in the Inland Empire, and also support them in identity-based leadership. And I now have the privilege and honor to be the executive director of Arts Connection, which is the Arts Council of San Bernardino County. And our mission is to empower communities, ensure a thriving arts and culture sector at every layer of our community, whether it's the zip code level, the city level, the municipality level, and the county level, or the regional level, which is what we're doing here around the Vital Conditions Network in the Inland Empire. And so a lot of people believe that arts and culture is the icing on top of a cake, but I believe, along with a lot of our community, believe that arts and culture is the cake. It is the fabric of our communities. It's the way we connect and relate to each other. It's how we feel that we belong, and I think is the foundation of what it means to thrive and be happy. And so I'm excited to share a little bit about a recent initiative that was birthed by creatives, our local community, as a post-pandemic response to bring community together and have creatives and filmmakers shape our own narrative. As during the pandemic, when we were all in isolation, we noticed there's a lot of media attention in San Bernardino around a lot of the challenges that we experience, whether it's at the state level media or national level of media. And they were telling our story. And so a response to that was for creatives to come together and develop our own festival that's centered and highlights our filmmakers. So extremely, extremely excited to share a little bit about that. Next slide. All right. So what is the Inland Empire Film Festival? So this initiative is designed to empower our local communities, our local film makers, by giving them a platform to tell their own stories and grow and nurture our filmmaker ecosystem, our creative ecosystem, and create a sense of belonging and pride. For those of you who don't know where the IE is, we're neighbors to Los Angeles County, and they take so for example, my sister is a creative. She's actually a filmmaker. She unfortunately didn't have a place here at her own home to work and make her dreams reality while she went to school. So she unfortunately had to leave home to go work in the LA media ecosystem. And so our goal through the film festival is to nurture the capacity of our ecosystem so our creatives could thrive and provide meaningful work for them here. How we're doing that is through the film festival. Not only are we creating a platform, but we also do workshops and master classes through a variety of partners across the region, whether it's community colleges, our local public universities, and local experts, to give them the tools and knowledge on how do they go from exploring the ideation phase of a film to launching it and having it on the big screen. And what does that landscape look like on the funding side, and bring it to life. Not only that, we also create networking events and industry panels where local community members that are aspiring to be filmmakers or are emerging or established could meet each other, network, and have a collective space for them to begin dreaming together on potential films, local films here in the IE. Next slide. And so this year, we are, this upcoming film festival, which will be happening in April, May of next year, we're aligning it around the vital condition. So really it's, as mentioned before, it's an initiative that not only gives them a platform, but also gives them the tools, entrepreneurial skills for them to grow their own ecosystem, so they could find meaningful work and wealth here locally and have a space where they could thrive as filmmakers in media. Along with that, what we noticed last year was our first time launching the film festival here in the IE, and we noticed that there was the narrative around it that took shape organically was how much pride there is in our community to be from the IE. And so through those stories, we noticed, and just by centering community, having our own community in the panels at the Regal Cinema, having our own stories be told on the big screen, that was nurturing a sense of belonging. And we expected 500 individuals to show up for the first film festival. We were extremely wrong. We got over 1,200 individuals just in the first year. And yeah, it was just an amazing environment. And so this year, we're extremely excited to have award categories around the vital conditions. So films that are highlighting meaningful work and wealth, whether it is individual past local heroes that have embodied that's going to be an award for some of the films, belonging in civic muscle, also environmental justice films as well, to bring awareness of some of the issues or challenges and stories that are happening locally through film and creativity, and to begin that conversation around what does it mean to have a thriving natural world. So those conversations at the award level and then also at the panels, we're going to start weaving those conversations through film and see where creatives take it. Next slide. So looking ahead, this is going to be our second year. This is happening in San Bernardino in downtown, which is it's in the lowest quartile of the Healthy Place Index. All of our events, all of our network activities, all our tools, our workshops happen and take place in the lowest quartile communities because we want to center equity, bring the tools to the communities that are yearning to tell their own story through film to their homes. And so looking ahead, we're going to be having this again in downtown San Bernardino at the Regal Cinema. Going to be taking place sometime April, May of next year. And we hope, and through the Vital Conditions Network, through our partners with Paulette, Susie, we are going to start having that space for dialogues and see how media creates that container, and deepen our connections, deepen our relationships, our understandings of the microcosms of culture in the vast region. We have urban, rural, we got mountains communities, we got high desert, we got low desert. And yeah, we hope to capture that through film. And so, yeah, extremely excited for this initiative to continue to grow, to nurture, and to see how, by centering creatives and to give them a platform, the tools, to see how they advance the variety of different sectors of the vital conditions. So yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. And then I'm going to go pass it back to Susie.
Gracias. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Alejandro. I know, first, I'm just so proud of you and, well, Paulette and everybody, but, sharing your stories with people from all over the country, it really means so much to all of us. And I see some friends and colleagues, like I said, on the call today. So I go, this work, this is what Vital Condition Network allows us to do, right? Normally, I knew Alejandro, I've known Paulette for years, but when is it there a time where we're on the same space, right? That doesn't happen. So I think us doing what we're doing today is the model of what's possible. So I get to talk a little bit about IECC now. It's a coalition of 109 nonprofits. We are a nonprofit. I'm the CEO. Our organization is dedicated to supporting nonprofits in the Inland Empire, working together really to create a more equitable, just region through capacity building strategies and advocacy. So next slide, please. So how this work, actually, our work with IECC and us being a backbone support for a lot of collaboration and coalitions in the region, we've been in this space for almost 10 years. And when we heard about Vital Conditions, I candidly was reluctant to bring it back to my coalitions unless I knew I could believe in it. As many of you know, there are a lot of things that come in ideas of the region. We've had them out here, and I'm sure you've had them. But then I think for us as smaller nonprofits or organizations, we kind of get burned in some ways in terms of it not being successful, but we bring along our coalitions and we start having them lose trust in us. So I wanted to be certain around this. And when I was, the ability for us then to align our work with what already existed, and most notably our work around civic muscle and policy and advocacy work, aligned itself with the work that was happening at the Children's Cabinet. So there are currently 168 stakeholders from both counties. Again, an unprecedented kind of endeavor. We started almost 4 years ago with this handful of us thinking right after COVID, that what could we do to help move the dial around children? Because at the time, our region was very, as it is throughout the country, very divisive. And we knew that if we landed on something that could just help kids and childcare, it maybe could be something that could unify us in the region. So that was the idea. And with it was this incredible onpouring of us having a space where different, from nonprofits to school districts to health providers to the Federal Reserve Bank to businesses now all sit on this very robust children's cabinet. Next slide, please. So here is the structure that we created for the Children's Cabinet on the back end, similar to Vital Conditions. And what we first noticed, it aligned very seamlessly, would integrate into what we had created already at this public table around advocacy and policy, around childcare, around health and wellness, around basic needs. So I think the alignment also complemented the work that we were doing, and the idea that we had to use data and evaluation. We, as Paulette used Esri. For those of you who don't know Esri, they are the leading world mapping from all over the world, but they also sit in our backyard here in the IE. So we are leveraging the fact that they have been great partners for us in utilizing their platforms and their software for us to be able to visually map where the higher concentrations of poverty levels overlaid with health scores in our region. And we're telling better stories around this, again, aligning to the vital conditions framework. So I think it's been a seamless integration into our work, and the ability for us to also demonstrate what's possible. We're not having to change how we measure. We're not having to change the structure of our organization. It just complements the work altogether. Next slide, please. I think that's all I have, actually. So again, just want to extend our gratitude for this opportunity to share a little bit about the Inland Empire and the work, the vital conditions work that we're doing. And again, understand the privilege and the honor we all have to be in these spaces to be able to share this information. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Susie and Paulette and Alejandra. I know just checking, there'll be some chance to kind of see if there's any other questions or comments that folks have. And, as we get ready to pivot maybe over to Sterling, just wondering, where are you all, if you have any other thoughts, where this is heading? You all are getting traction. There's some momentum, talk about reclaiming a new narrative. What's new about this versus other kind of attempts at collaboration? Where do you see it going from here? What gives you hope in that? If you have any other thoughts on that, any of the three of you.
I can start just because we've been out doing these kind of convenings over the past. We launched the hub on June 4th. And so we've been doing small groups, big groups. What's giving me hope right now is just the real desire to collaborate in a way where people don't see each other necessarily as competitors. Historically had been, viewed each other as competitors, and now looking at how do we collaborate. So I was in Coachella Valley, and we had people who came from Riverside proper, city of Riverside, some people who came from city of San Bernardino, came out to the desert, and folks in Coachella were so appreciative. They were like, okay, you're coming out to us, we always have to come to you. But then we had TV stations, we had radio, and we had even some print. We had a guy who's doing some AI a newsletter, and he's working on this stuff with artificial intelligence, all in the same space, talking about how do we work together to tell these stories. So that for me was that was just Monday. And so we're seeing that as we're going out more. There's just a desire. And I think with the vital conditions framework, it gives people a direction. It gives people like a shared language. And that's what's exciting as well. It's just really helpful for us. And then for us to also leverage it for, to build capacity, but raise money so we could help build capacity. So I think that for me, that's what's giving me hope and keeping me excited.
You can be next, Alejandro.
I'll go quickly. So when I was working in the funder realm within the San Bernardino County, I noticed so many silos working there. And I was on the funding side doing data analysis and evaluation on health indicators for children and families across the whole county, San Bernardino County. And I noticed there wasn't a holistic framework to get folks to come together and see that to address some of the challenges our families, our children, our communities are going through, we need a different way to think about how we serve them and how do we improve the health outcomes. And so I'm really excited being part of Arts Connection and the arts and culture ecosystem, because through the Vital Conditions Network, it provides a space and a container for us to come together, a variety of different sectors, nonprofits, working in health, just health equity, the arts and culture folks, artists, funders, to come together and start aligning how we collectively support our communities. And through that, like, we're now seeing creatives supporting housing. That didn't, usually there's a lot of artwork telling some of the stories around why humane housing is necessary, and we have to think about the holistic foundation of our communities, but now we're seeing them collaborate. And so I think that I haven't seen in my young career yet. And so for me, it's really exciting because now we're all at the table supporting each other, shaping change. So it's really exciting.
So I'll just end. For me, on the other end of the spectrum, one of the older persons here that's been here and lived here in this community for over 60 years, right, is this hopefulness amongst us, right? Not just for myself, but for my community. And this place I've called my home is there's this eagerness to be engaged, willingness. We now serve as ambassadors for this work. We've been kind of the unofficial ambassadors. So we get asked, as Paulette and Alejandro, but a lot of us, there's not just the three of us, there's a lot of us in this network to go talk to educators, to go talk to funders, to go talk to nonprofits in any space that we are. So it is that multiplier of us being able to share what's possible once we see it happening for ourselves. Our trusted messengers that we come with coalitions now come with us around this journey. And I have never seen that in any work that I did. My 22 years working as a teacher and as a special education teacher, as well as a social work for clients with disabilities, never ever seen this type of unification around us as a community. And I think that's what gives me hope. In that, I will have my grandchildren see the fruit of this labor that we're starting here this year. Yeah.
Beautiful note. And maybe just even to think about that alignment and some of the energy, I think Sterling, I'm going to invite you in the conversation. I think came in when that video that you saw, I think 600 people essentially showed up of their philanthropy summit and policy summit. That was extraordinary. There's 40 funders, as head of housing, and on and on. We're all there organized around this common language. And Sterling, that was just kind of your first foray into it. So maybe Sterling, you could share a little bit around kind of the lenses that you bring and kind of what stuck out for you.
Thanks, Monty. And I think people must be asking, why would I fly across the country from the colony of Washington, D.C. to the empire in the Inland Empire of Southern California and sit in the room? And I'm echoing Susie's initial skepticism, like, oh, here's another framework. How many times have we seen frameworks? And yet suddenly it's like, oh, from skeptic to ambassador. And then Alejandro, while the arts and culture don't appear in the vital conditions framework, as you said, I'm at this summit in the big conference room and we're singing and dancing as well as talking about all this wonky cognitive elected officials, folks. And I had a great conversation with Paulette because good information is critical for community work. But so why did I come across the country? Well, three big reasons. One, I too, when I saw the vital conditions framework, I was struck by the building blocks of those vital conditions. And then of course, that fundamental ethic of thriving together, which I've done decades of work in diversity, equity, inclusion with an emphasis on racial justice and racial equity. But it struck me that the vital conditions really starts with the I in DEI. It says, let's start with inclusion. And then if we're striving for equity, we'll have to embrace and work on our diversity. And it happens that way. And then, of course, the third feature is this powerful insight of civic muscle and belonging. And that's what really, when I had coffee with Bobby Milstein a year or two ago, I was like, oh, wait a minute. You're not just talking about services and conditions. You're talking about engagement and connection. And to me, the civic muscle and belonging it's a tactic, it's a strategy, it's a process, it's an outcome. And it really gives more meaning and focus to what do we mean by this fuzzy term of civic engagement. So that was the first reason. I wanted to see a community that was actually using the vital conditions framework, this unity, this holistic that Alejandro talked about. And okay, let me see it in action. Now, the second reason is I am a huge champion of community foundations. I worked at a community foundation up in Northern California, in the Valley, on the peninsula. And 20 years ago, I was part of an 8-county initiative in California to try to reinvent services for children, youth, and families. And it didn't seem to have a lot of impact, because Susie's slide was great. Well, you've got this slide, you can put it on a chart, but how do you make it work? How do you make it sing? And I think, community foundations have this incredible potential as agile servants in their communities. They're in the relationship business. Yes, they make grants, they engage donors, but it's the relationship business. It's building the connective tissue and the central nervous systems across all these networks of networks. It's almost like I say, looking at the community, it's a big 2 counties, from the Goodyear blimp, where you can actually see everybody. You can see the arts people and the health people and the mental health people and the housing people. You see it all, but how you actually bring it together. So a big fan of that. And knowing that if you're trying to build something new, brick by brick, well, every brick touches 6 other bricks, right? And so that's how it starts to sort of snowball. But the final reason is I find myself looking back on my career sort of always at the intersection of philanthropy, community, and democracy. And I really feel, having served on the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission that produced the Our Common Purpose report in 2020, the report talked about 6 different strategies, and some were really focused on voters and elections, on political institutions. But they also talked about bridging capacity. And the sixth strategy was inspire a culture of commitment to American constitutional democracy and to one another. And that was all about civic culture. And civic culture really can only be created in community, and it is a local strategy. And we have challenges at the national level. You have tremendous buy-in from the state of California, which I saw at the summit. But to me, if we're going to build trust and belonging and civic muscle, it's by working out in the community gym every day with the people you live with. And so that's what I said. I've got to come to the Inland Empire and sit in the room. And I was just blown away, because the people on stage were not your usual suspects. The diversity of the people that spoke and talked, the people at my table, that's I guess the magic of vital conditions work and building civic muscle and belonging. You just get this incredible mix of people. And as I think Alejandro was describing, you have 2 huge counties. People might not feel very connected across those vast expanses. And I think every community has that. There's insiders and outsiders. There's the cities and the communities. But the magic is bringing that together and making it happen. And finally, I'd say in philanthropy, there's been a wonderful framework called the 4 traditions of philanthropy. And the first 3 we've known about forever. The first, of course, is charity and relieving human suffering. And that's kind of the urgent services in the vital conditions framework. Take care of people who are hurting, reach out, be compassionate. The second tradition of philanthropy is education, human development, help people develop, get their talents to blossom. And the third tradition, which most of us stop at, is systems change, policy advocacy. And we ask, why are people still hungry? Why do we still not educating people to their full potential? Why aren't the systems changing? Well, the fourth tradition of philanthropy is civic engagement. That things really change when people come together and say, what do we want? As Meg Wheatley has said, no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And not only what it cares about, but what it's willing to do to make that change happen. And it doesn't happen just with the activists or the advocates. I think you're working, as some of the literature says, at the grassroots, at the grass tops, but also with the grass, just the people in community. And the fact that you can reach them in that way is a power that is really unstoppable. And I love the collaborative Susie described, and Monty at the Open. It's like, there are a lot of people working on this, but I think the power is why I came across the country is I want to see how you're doing it in the Inland Empire. And how could we emulate that or propagate that? We don't have to replicate it, but we can take, and you have several key elements. Like, for example, Paulette's work with this journalism hub. I mean, everybody knows you've got to have local news, You could also have local civic tech, pro-social, social media. Participatory budgeting was almost mentioned at the summit. You know, how do we work with local government? How do we have citizens assemblies, civic assemblies? You know, there's lots more things we can do together, but it's additive. You know, I love the metaphor of momentum in the literature, but momentum is like a mass moving. But I think there's maybe other metaphors of proliferation or immersion or saturation, you know, culture, civic culture. And finally, I'll just say the Academy has just published a brand new report on civic culture. And it's called Habits of the Heart and Mind and How to Fortify Civic Culture. And several of the things you're doing, of the characteristics of the report: practice civic love and joy, that's arts; promote habits of service, we love our volunteerism; practice mutualism and mutual aid. But these are the ones I think that resonate most with the Inland Empire. Create a space for free exchange of ideas and model being unafraid. Spread narratives of common purpose. Engage people in co-design and decision-making, and root activity in shared place. So it's all about localism. I think if Archimedes was asking, give me a place to stand, I could move the world, it would be in community. It would be right here with the people you live with. And what's really cool about the Inland Empire, it has it all. It has diversity, it's got spread, it's got vitality. When I heard about fastest growing section of California, it's like, wow, it's just like, there's a lot of energy to build on. But, you know, we're still waiting for some community to make a breakthrough. People are moving to the Inland Empire, maybe because it's a more affordable place to live, but what if it's just a better place to live? Because it has this initiative. So that's why I'm just a fan of Vital Conditions. I'm really proud that the Community Foundation, with all of its partners, has stepped into this work. And I hope more donors and donor advisors will see this work and say, this is the fourth tradition. Invest in civic engagement and your community will prosper. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for all that, Sterling. And, you know, it's interesting. It's hard to tell the story here. I see some other folks from the Inland Empire and the Vital Conditions Network that's on here. And it's such a rich tapestry, to use Susie's term. I mean, the folks from San Bernardino that are organizing their community benefit and their housing work around this whole new housing collaborative, this grant that you alluded to that's around belonging and civic muscle. So changing your grant making around these pieces, and the fact that you have all of your hospitals in Southern California that are organizing around the Vital Conditions as a bridging framework. I mean, these are just some of those facets of these different kind of parts of momentum. And it's a gift to listen to you all, and the heart in which you all bring and serve and love your community is palpable, as somebody just put in the chat. So thank you, Susie and Paulette and Alejandro and Sterling, for being a champion and a reflector. And this last part, Bobby, your names come up, throw it to you. You and Rippel have been so instrumental in a lot of this work around the country, and let you take it from here.
Yeah, this has been a real gift to hear, not just from one person telling the story of a vast region, but even in three voices, the richness of what we're seeing from different points of view. Just imagine if we had the time to hear a fourth and a fifth and a 500th. I mean, this is really the story of people who are doing their part for something much bigger than any of us alone could do. And, you know, Paulette, I just love the way you made that comment about, you know, you're going to cover stories, but you're asking questions. What does it look like to thrive together? What does it look like to tell a story that is creative and truthful, that is passionate? And, you know, just a great teacher of mine in this work says, we grow in the directions of the questions we ask. And in many ways, this Vital Conditions work grows out of frustrations of constantly debating, you know, do people need housing? I was done with that question long ago. People need humane housing. The only question is how we're going to assure it for everybody, and who's, you know, where's the unfinished work of making sure that no one's left out. And so the genesis of this framework in some ways comes out of focusing on the questions we most need to ask and getting the creative energies directed around that. So these next 20 minutes on this call are really your time to, you know, like either raise questions that you want to talk with folks in IE about what they're doing, or increasingly, you know, I think if you're like me, you're thinking what's similar or different in what I'm hearing in IE versus what we see in your walk of life and the spheres of influence that you touch. So we know this movement is bigger and more vibrant than it can seem if you're looking only at mainstream sources. So even on the call, we've got 60 folks here together. we're going to put up a little survey tool where you can just flag if you've got other stories of momentum or deepening or enriching. I love the question, Sterling, about what's the better metaphor for this work. But for now, if you've got one of those stories where, hey, this thing deserves attention, we'd love to begin to flag where those stories are. And maybe we'll cover a little bit of them today, but more importantly, as we continue this widening work, there'll be time to spotlight more. So take a screenshot of this, or there's a link in the chat we could probably add to, Molly.
Yes, I'm going to pull up the poll that will have the QR code on it as well. And we can watch it populate while Bobby moves us through some questions. So
so this is your time to ask questions, either of the colleagues in Inland Empire, or to share what feels similar, different in your work. And this is open dialogue. So whoever wants to go first, raise your hand. And we'll go for it. Walt, please.
Well, I just want to say, oh my gosh, how cool it is. So I know Sterling and I know Bobby, and I know a lot of people who are working on organizing things in a more comprehensive network of networks kind of way at the local basis. So specifically Better Together America, where some of my colleagues are concentrating their effort. So the thing I just want to point out and invite is how to bring this kind of example and all the elements that Thriving Together has brought into the work of Better Together America and others who are trying to do place-based organizing, that goes beyond the pale of networking of networks. So anyway, I just really excited to hear the story, and I love what Sterling had to say about reflecting back what he saw, his wisdom and knowledge of the field and what's happening and what's not happening is outstanding. And anyway, so I'm effervescently excited about what just happened and I saw today. Thank you.
I'm seeing this comment in the chat from Guru Mantra about your own media efforts. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing and how that's turning out to feel profitable for you?
We're finding that in a number of our areas where we work in land conservation and community development, there's becoming grant requirements for outreach and advocacy that weren't being considered before. And we're finding that neighbors are beginning to self-organize around things that they weren't doing before either, around particularly impacts of what land use pressure is like in inland Southern California. We've got 37 square miles of warehouses where we used to have thousands of acres of prime ag land. And, we're not getting any benefits from the fact that we have this pressure on us. And so communities are beginning to ask questions about, well, before we do any more approvals, what about we mitigate what we have? Where are the solar panels for community solar on some of the rooftops? Or where's the urban greening impacts that are going to impact the heat island impacts? And that wasn't happening even 18 months ago. And it's like, this is happening quickly now. And every chance I get, I'm promoting what Paulette's doing, because that's the most important stuff. Once we have somebody covering our local city councils and our land use decisions at the community level, in a journalism course doing this from grade school on through high school and junior college, by the time they're out of school or whatever they're doing, at the very least, they're going to understand how the civic soup is made, and they're going to have a much more impact on what it is we accept for a thriving community. And I think that's the real key of what she's offering there by that kind of journalism training. It's decentralized, it's happening everywhere. And the more we can fund it, this isn't going to take long. It's like when they said you couldn't give kids a salad bar in grade school because they put snot on it. They found out by the time they put those kids in high school and they didn't have a salad bar, those kids were pissed off because they understand what food and nutrition meant.
it takes so little to get this stuff happening. And these are the key kernels that are the most exciting things happening out here.
I love your salad bar analogy there, because it reinforces a thing about, like, what do we expect? If we expect good food, fresh food, then, you know, people will start to build systems that deliver on those expectations. So do we really build communities in ways that we expect everyone to thrive? No, we're light years away from doing that, but you're starting to see the through line of what happens, you know, in IE and even in the chat here, this vibrant little thread on, you know, how do we welcome returning prisoners into community? You know, that could seem like an esoteric topic until you see that it's another expression of shared humanity. It's an expression of recognizing how we can become a bigger we in so many ways. So thank you for that salad bar analogy. I don't think it's going to be easily forgotten by any of us here. Let's see. We've got a few other things in the chat or on screen now. Whoever wrote the Tennessee story, can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, this is Richard Taylor with Empower Upper Cumberland. We started this about 2 years ago, came together to apply for a state of Tennessee grant to address poverty. And this is a group that had never formed a coalition before, so we all came together and we won the grant. And so now we're implementing the project to help families out of poverty. And using I've been involved with the Wellbeing in the Nation Network for a while, so we use the 7 vital conditions as part of the journey in terms of helping address the wide range of challenges, including housing and food and transportation and healthcare and things like that, as part of that journey out of poverty. Because of the key issue that we're running across is the benefits cliff. You know, once you start making more money, you start losing your Medicaid, you start losing your SNAP, you start losing housing vouchers. And so that's what we're trying to address, is how do we remove those barriers in this journey.
I'm so glad you mentioned the benefits, Cliff, because, you know, we didn't really cover it fully on today's call, but there has been a similar conversation about organizing around vital conditions across federal agencies, and they developed a pioneering plan on how now up to 47 federal agencies are talking about the things that they could do together. And they identified a suite of multi-solvers, and working on that benefits cliff was one of them. There were, I think, a dozen multi-solvers that the federal agencies lifted up, and we could put this in the chat in a second, but that benefits cliff is one of them. If you did it, you'd see changes across a whole bunch of typically separate priority areas that all start to center people and place and the kind of conditions that are in place to help people. So thank you for that example. Love it. Other questions that are on your mind here? We've got sort of 2 lanes of conversation here. Stories that are, sort of ongoing efforts, and questions about what makes this hard, interesting, what you're curious about, what you're running into. Leah, please.
Good afternoon. I had to hop off to go get my kiddos. And I did put a question in the chat. I work in organizational development. And so my question is around the term meaning. When we talk about meaningful work. And I did do a little bit of research, and I found a meta-analysis around meaning. And long story short, we don't necessarily have a great tool in our field to measure meaning. We do have other things that we measure. And so is there any clarification for us on that, or have we kind of talked about maybe having a definition?
Yeah, so if you hopped off, you may have missed some of the response in the chat to that. So we can repost those.
So sorry.
No apologies. It's an excellent question, and I think it goes for any of these adjectives.
If you've discussed it.
No. I think it's a totally fair question. That is one of these kind of work in progress questions, right? Each of these vital conditions were deliberately named with an adjective in front. So we don't just say housing, we say humane housing, and we don't just say work and wealth, it's meaningful work and wealth. Some of that is partly to ascertain where are our standards and expectations as a society, because those things have not gotten nearly as much attention as, the kind of soup of other kinds of measurement that don't attempt to set a standard around this work. So I love the question. There are some initial responses that we can repost. And it goes for all of these other adjectives. So for those of you who are prioritizing meaningful work and wealth, how do you do it? I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. How do you do it? It sounds like this was one of the IE themes, right? So I don't know where the discussion has been around there. And Alejandro, this has a lot to do with who tells the story. Meaning is in the eye of the beholder in some ways, and not just for a scientist to measure.
I am happy to share two. I don't know that I have it immediately available, but I'll hand it off to Michelle Decker. But I will share what we do and what we do measure, and what we have found over decades of research about what does bring meaning. And so I'll forward that on to you guys.
Great. Thank you, Stacy, for adding these things. Right, and Jason's making a nice point here about Gallup's work in this space. Is adds another facet to it. So the more multifaceted these things could be, the more we have a civic discussion about, well, maybe engagement is one thing, but is it safe? Is it affordable? Is it part of a bigger, that civic pride that we're talking about? How is it connected to the equity agenda? These things, like, there's almost the sky's the limit on elevating what meaning means the minute you start allowing us to look at it from different facets. Thank you, Leah. Excellent question. I'm just looking at the clock. We have time for a few more. What else is on folks' mind? Jason.
Yeah, first a comment. I think the film festival is brilliant because at so many, if you double or triple click into the thought of that, it's actually bringing people together through through content that brings people together. So I think it's a really good way. And then what I've been thinking about, I made that second comment about 7 different stakeholder groups, is really trying to change mental models through language, through that. So I can see how film festivals and that, and then aligning to this language can really help to reinforce the language. And we continue to do that with the different stakeholder groups we're working with, so that they are working together, thinking not from a deficit mindset, but from kind of a vital condition mindset. So, I like this idea of coming up with gathering approaches that are not just, hey, let's all talk about vital conditions, but actually kind of live through the ethos of that. One other thing on that measurement, just a comment. So we've been doing some experimentation around measuring various forms of flourishing. And so we have this measurement system where people measure every week, and we've kind of tied spiritual to meaning, because for 2 reasons. One, people who are not, let's say, religious in a church or that kind of church-ish type perspective can still tie themselves into spiritual, but people who are can also tie themselves into meaning. So we've been using that as a way to think through meaning, and then been trying to create what we would call good practices around our various forms. So good practices around meaning and what people are doing. So it's less prescriptive and more like stories, so that people can say, oh, maybe I can adopt this to help improve my spiritual flourishing or my sense of meaning.
Yeah, it's lovely. We had earlier on this call Harry Boyd. He had to leave a little bit early, but there's a whole tradition of civic professionalism where a lot of people think of their jobs as kind of a private paycheck, and then democracy is what you do through voting and volunteering. But the idea that your work is what you're doing to contribute to a larger commonwealth, and there's large civic significance behind whether you're a journalist or a farmer or a teacher, like everybody in every walk of life can do that. And in many ways, that's what we think of as expressions of stewardship. When we're doing our work as if we were shared stewards, it immediately brings meaning and obligations and accountabilities to do this work in ways that are not damaging or excluding anybody, but actually unlocking the potential for people who don't yet feel that they belong and don't feel that their contributions matter. And So that's something that can happen in every job, no matter how, where you are on the leadership hierarchy of your organization. You could be a steward, and we're seeing how institutions can, can change from within when you see that there are made up of people who are now starting to think like, okay, this is not just a company and a job. This is something that shapes our community. So thank you for that. Well, this is a conversation that will continue. We are dedicated to having sort of quarterly huddles with a widening circle of colleagues who are doing this. And we do have some serious questions about what you most want to do in these kinds of forums. So Molly, do you want to close us out with some of our questions about next steps?
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. This was wonderful to hear from everyone. And I just love getting to sit and play a small part in facilitating all these stories. So just thank you personally for that. I'm going to launch a very quick poll that we would love for you all to just spend a couple of minutes before you go. We do, as Bobby mentioned, we are committed to doing these quarterly if possible. So the next one would be roughly Q1 of next year. So we have a couple of topic options that roughly align with commitments in the Thriving Together ethos. So definitely pick your top 2 to 3. There's also an optional question for any specific suggestions you have. Also, please feel free to share those with any of us privately or publicly now. I will share out a recording of this, including the chat, any resources shared. And I think that's all. Please contact us. I'm going to put the links have not been my friend today, but the Thriving Together email. You're all, since you registered, you're all going to be on my listserv for these, so you'll be alerted for the next meeting. But please contact us to stay engaged. Do any of my colleagues have anything else to share?
Just immense gratitude for everything that is happening in the IE, and your willingness to share the story with others too. That's not a given. And Susie, you mentioned what it means to be showing up in spaces that we don't normally get to share these kinds of stories, right? There isn't a natural venue for it, so we have to work hard to build the infrastructure around the edges of what our current work allows. And so thank you for being a pioneering example and what we may hopefully do more of. Double click on a different point in the map and see what's happening there. So if you're one of those change makers in your community and want to lift up the story of what's happening there, let us know, and we can think about what's the right form and the right timing for you.
Yes, please take the poll as you leave, but thank you so much for being here.
Okay, safe travels all.